Blue Table fans, it's time for another episode of Gatelynomics. Today I'm going to touch on a lot of different topics. I do want to make a few prefacetory statements. By the way, that's not a real word, I just made that up. The first is, Gatelynomics is not a science. It is the realm of anecdote. And so on some of these I'll have comments, and some I won't have comments, but please, let's keep it to just some polite commentary. And but the important thing is, how does this affect you? How do all of these ideas come into play in real life for you as a person? And because what I found is, maybe this complex economic formula is correct, but it doesn't help me if my checking account's overdrawn. It has to be, how do things affect me? And I guess it comes down to personal observation. Like, I walk down the street in downtown Spanish Fork, and I wonder why every block an acre of land is dedicated to this giant bank with, notable amounts of landscaping, and almost all the other businesses are just barely getting by. And I want to know why that is. And I ask questions, why are things happening? Why is it that I've been paying on my house for 7 years, but I don't own, a 5-foot square area of it? How can that be? And so I'm not launching into quantification. That's kind of a big topic, but I want to just touch on a few items. And I beg of you to not make blanket or esoteric statements. I don't want to. I'm interested in the human side of things. And so I guess what's the first thing? Sustainability of a business. When you're setting prices and you own your own business, you have to make sure that you take into account all of the different factors. Because every 5 years you're going to have some kind of emergency. And I think that's why a lot of small businesses go out of business, because they don't take into account the full cost of their products. And so you have to be careful. Even if, for example, let's say you're a soloist for painting miniatures, and you think, well, I need to get by. I need to make, say, $10 an hour. And then you paint some figures, and you find out that you can do 2 figures in an hour. So you think, oh, okay, great. Well, I'll charge $5. Well, guess what? You have gas to get down to the post office. You're going to have paints, brushes, those expenses. That's the obvious ones. And but you're also going to have personal emergencies every once in a while. And there's sustainability in another sense of, well, your current expenses may not always be what your expenses are going to be. What if a child comes along? What if you get married? What if you have an illness where you need to buy a certain amount of prescriptions every month? And so you have to really do a more thorough calculation into how you set up the pricing for your product, which gets into another topic of great interest to me, which is profit. Profit, I guess the most basic definition is it's what's left after all your expenses. So you have gross sales, this is your income, you subtract your expenses off of that, and whatever's left is your profit. Now, a small business, even a sole proprietorship, but usually a corporation of some kind, will has, by law, 2 almighty powers that are just outstanding, and you have to factor this in when you're trying to figure out what's going on. And that is the power to set wages and the power to set prices. Now, the power to set wages does have one federally mandated limitation, and that is the federal minimum wage. And so, again, I'm warning everybody, don't throw Molotov cocktails into the mix here. Just some personal anecdote, maybe some thoughts or insights. And that includes me. I'm being very careful about how I go about this to make it accessible. And that's what Gatelynomics is all about. It's a personal anecdote, accessibility, and understandability. Minimum wage is a limitation on how low you can pay, but there isn't an upper limit. Have you noticed that? There's no law saying, well, you can't pay more than a certain amount. Something that's interesting to me that I've been asking myself recently is, well, what are the limitations of government on whatever level it is? Could they pass a law saying minimum wage was $50 and just say, well, like it or lump it, if you don't do it, you're getting fined or going to jail? Is there any limitation to what can be done? And I look at trajectories like, well, where is this going? It's the old, what was that? The tribute of earth and water. Well, that, even though that's not, a difficult tribute, it establishes that tribute can be exacted. So I'm wary of these things. So anyway, so minimum wage, I called in a couple of workers one time. Sorry about that, I had an interruption. So I once called in a couple of workers, and just as a mental exercise, well, I didn't call them in, we were just standing around. And as a mental exercise, I said, what would you do if the federal minimum wage were repealed, and I informed you that I was now going to pay you $2 an hour? And they kind of got a stricken look on their face, and one of them said, I don't know how I would live. I guess I would have to get another job. And I was a little disappointed, because I'm like, no, you wouldn't. You would say, Sean, I'm not going to accept $2 an hour. And that got me thinking. Later, there was another worker. Yeah, I hate to say my employees or my workers. It just, I don't know, just smacks of being a little pejorative. So anyway, I said, okay, what would happen if federal minimum wage were repealed and I would only pay you $2 an hour? And she said, well, I wouldn't work here anymore. And I said, that's right, you wouldn't work here. And I would have to come up with a more acceptable evaluation of your skills. And so, okay, where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about power to set wages and prices. So, and that worker would have, that particular one that I'm talking about, can command a higher wage because she's good. She has a skill that I need and I can't do without it. And when I cast my eyes roundabout upon the labor pool, I think it would be more of an effort to find someone with a similar skill set, similar level of abilities, than it is just to keep her on. So there's an equilibrium there. Now, it is possible to get somebody for a cheaper wage than they deserve, and they just never know the difference. They just assume that you're doing the right thing. Now, that's not me. I tend to pay my people more towards the higher end of what's possible rather than the lower end. And that's good business sense. That is really good business sense. So here's I guess the mental exercise here is, well, why not just pay minimum wage? What if all businesses all of a sudden said, you know what, we're not going to pay more than $7.25 an hour? Well, I don't think that would work. I don't think it will work. So everything over minimum wage is actually, in my view, a function of the free market, which is the voluntary action of humans unforced. That you agree to a certain wage. And I think when people are looking for, well, I've noticed it, when I put a higher amount of pay for a job, I tend to get a better quality of applicant. And it can vary by region too. In California, when we lived there, no one would look at you for less than 15 for the most part, but the living expenses were really high. You know, we rented a 2-bedroom condo for $1,200 a month, and we were lucky to get it that low. It was because a family member of my wife's owned it, and it was usually about $14.50. So everything between minimum wage and what people are paid, that's a function of the free market. And there are interesting sort of rumblings of caps, too, of capping CEOs' salaries. And that I always kind of get a question mark, because I'm like, okay, well, if it's a private business and people patronize this business and that's why they got all this money, however much people paid, then why can't they pay whatever they want to whoever they want? And so that's kind of an interesting topic on which I don't know hardly anything. So I'm going to stop talking about it. So, but it makes for interesting mental exercise. It's like, well, why don't I just go around and why don't I just pay all of my workers $50 an hour? Everyone's getting raises to $50 an hour. Yay! Oh, too bad. 3 days later, I'm out of. So in a way, it occurred to me a couple weeks back, wages at my company aren't necessarily determined by me. They're determined by you. What are you willing to pay to have your miniatures painted and to get the services that we provide? And when I want to give my workers a raise, i.e. raise wages, I go to the free market, that's you, and I set my prices. And if you say yes, if you give your permission, i.e. you still choose us over other possibilities that you have, that means that wage increase can stick. And that's been really nice. Off the top of my head, I'd say we've at least increased at 5 to 10% a year for wages for blue table painting, which is a nice feature, especially given economic conditions. So to me, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to double all wages. Oh, but I'll also double my prices. Guess what? Probably not going to stick. Why? Because you, the consumer, you're not going to go for that. And so, but I go to the people that work for me and I say, be careful with the projects. Do a good job. Don't make mistakes. Make sure everything is right. Let's get them turned around in a timely fashion. That will give us leverage on the free market to make sure that our prices can remain stable against intrusions, higher competition, or whatever else is going on out there, or that we'll be able to maintain or gain higher wages and profits because of the service that we're providing. And so far, so good. You guys have allowed us to grow and have said yes to the wonderful things that we want to do. So you have to imagine a spectrum of gross sales. I really need both hands for this, but I'll try and do it with just one. Because the other one's holding the camera. So you have to imagine, here's gross sales. So from here to here, it's X amount of money is actually coming into the business. Now how can you make that go bigger? There's really only one way, and that is to increase your prices or increase your volume, somehow get more money in. Now let's say you've got to imagine wages on one side and other expenses kind of next to it, this little subgroup, and then on the other side you have a profit margin. Like after all expenses you get profit. So the profit's kind of in the middle. The profit's between the expenses associated with the business and however much you were able to actually get for your product or services. And that's the two powers. You have to imagine it like Moses parting the waters. The employer can control wages. You can make your profit margin go up by reducing wages. And you can make your profit margin go up, or not your margin, but you can make your profit, your net profit go up by increasing the sales or the prices of your product. So unless you get rid of those two powers, corporations will always be able to protect their profits. And in the case of my company, there's pushbacks. There's pushbacks on everything that allows for there to be a harmony. If you pushed things to the point where that profit was so small that it wasn't worth the risk and the effort, then I would simply not go forth with the business at all. And when employers, when businesses are looking for ways to reduce expenses, I have to tell you, the easiest place to look, the place where there can be the most give, is wages. And you got to watch out for those wages. And the pushback is the quality of your worker and the value that they bring to the company. I heard one financial commentator say once that if he had a worker that could make, and I'm really paraphrasing here, if he can make $10,000 come into the company, and that worker costs per month, and that worker only cost $5,000 to maintain them, he could hire an infinity of those workers. He could just keep hiring them, just keep finding more of that person. And so I guess that just speaks to the value of the people that work for a company. And I think a lot of times people undervalue themselves. So I'm not advocating for getting rid of those two powers. Those two powers are amazing, and it's the choices of the people that work for a certain company inside, and it's the choices of the people outside that push back on those two things and hopefully achieve some kind of equilibrium there. But they are two almighty powers, and wage and price controls enforced by the government, I think, effectively stifle creativity and make people not want to go into business. All right, folks. Well, it's getting late. I better wrap this up. Those are my thoughts about wage and price things. I guess to bring it home, what value are you bringing if you're a worker at a business? What really is your value? Could you be replaced by somebody that would accept a lower wage but provide the same service and diligence and skill? Or is your employer maybe undervaluing you? And same thing goes for employers. Are you under or overvaluing the people that work for you? And you have to look at the market too. Is the marketplace that you're in, will they say yes to wage increases? Or will they say no? Or will they mandate wage decreases? And this ties into this concept, the two concepts of sustainability and pricing. They have to do with each other, because when you're setting up a business, you have to have all of these things in balance, and you have to tune them very carefully, or else you'll be out of business. It just simply won't be sustainable. And you have to be careful all around. And there is such a thing as, well, maybe the free market, i.e. the customers, will say, you know what, we really don't want this particular product or service. And unless you have some kind of laws in place forcing people to some extent or another to use your product or service, then the wishes of the customers will prevail on you. And so it's really a good idea to have a clear vision of what those things are, and that'll help you keep your business going. Well, anyway, as usual, I'd like to follow this up with the postscript of I don't think I'm a particularly virtuous or intelligent individual. I realize I can't be right all of the time, and I do like to see things in a new way and also to get additional insights. So I would just ask you to keep your comments germane, and be careful not to go off into the stratosphere, I guess. Yeah, can't say it any better than that. Well, good night.